Hey, everybody. Before we get to the show, I wanted to thank those of you who've joined us on Patreon to become members of our Patreon community. It's so great to have so many of you from all over the world. Andrea, one of the perks of the Patreon community membership is a monthly Zoom call. Tell us more about that.
You get a Zoom call every second and third Thursday. So that's with the three of us on the second and third Thursday of the month.
And Dr. Cooper, two different levels. So the second Thursday of the month is for one level. The third Thursday of the month is for the other level. Tell us more about the different levels on Patreon and what those mean.
Yes. One of the levels is for the general public, our regular listeners, and it'll be a live Q&A. Bring your questions, and we'll try to answer as many as we possibly can. And the other level, the higher level, is for, we call it Pro. It's for healthcare professionals. And the general public's welcome to join that one. But it will be answering more technical questions, probably, in that live Zoom call.
And I feel like the importance of this is that the discussions that are taking place more frequently now between patients and providers are so important for guaranteeing, a good treatment and a good addressing of the issue of metabolic dysfunction. There's power in community. So we just wanted to say thanks, everybody, for joining us on Patreon. All right, let's get to the show. So Paula says, I've been listening for weeks now, and you're leaving me hanging. Fine, I get it. Diets don't work and disrupt your metabolism. But what is someone supposed to do when they are 80 pounds overweight? You have to get to a healthy weight before you can implement your just eat and sleep and move advice. That's an interesting question, Dr. Cooper. It's kind of a catch-22.
I love that, Paula. I hear you. Well, we don't have to wait. You don't have to wait to get to a healthy weight before you implement those strategies. In fact, if you don't implement those strategies, you probably won't get to a healthy weight. But implementing those strategies isn't enough to get to a healthy weight, and I agree with you on that.
Welcome to Fat Science. I'm Mark Wright, along with Andrea Taylor and Dr. Emily Cooper. It's great to see you two.
Hi.
Hello.
All right, another edition of Mailbag. Let's jump right in. First up, Naltrexone Bupropion, that's always hard for me to say, for mild weight struggle. This is an email we got from Becca Goldberg in Boston. She says, Hi, Dr. Cooper. I recently started listening to your podcast, and I've been completely hooked. I've learned so much. You're the first person who's actually convinced me that eating regularly and eating enough to support metabolism and improve health and weight management. I had a question about the combination of naltrexone and bupropion. I've been on Wellbutrin for about a year for anxiety, but I haven't noticed any changes in weight. My provider doesn't think I qualify for a GLP-1. I'm 31, female, 5'7", 168. I weight cycled through my 20s, about 30 pounds plus and minus. I'm currently at my heaviest. I'm trying to lose weight in a sustainable way without going back to restrictive dieting. My doctor agreed to prescribe naltrexone, but mentioned that it may only have mild effects on weight loss or even just maintenance. I'm curious whether you think this combination could still be helpful for someone like me in the not in the obese category, but still carrying some extra weight. So that's from Becca in Boston. Dr. Cooper.
Oh, thank you, Becca. That's a great question. I'm sure a lot of people, wonder about that. And we try not to talk too much about actual weight numbers and things like that here on the podcast, but it makes sense that Becca, listed that just so you get a clear picture of what's going on. And so that does fall into what's considered a 26 or so BMI. And of course, we don't value BMI very much either, but according to the guidelines for quote, obesity treatment, the BMI needs to be 30 or higher or 27 or higher with comorbidities, meaning health issues. So in terms of looking at what her doctor said is accurate, someone in that range doesn't qualify from an insurance perspective for treatment, medical treatment for obesity with pharmacology. But we always say that the metabolic system is sort of not necessarily something that you can tell from the outside what's going on inside. So that includes the fact that not everyone with a high body weight has all these health issues. Not everyone with a normal weight has a perfect metabolic system. So really, elevated weight is more of a physical sign of an underlying metabolic problem. But due to genetics, some people are more prone to that physical sign than others. So I'm not saying that Becca doesn't have a metabolic problem just because her weight's not in the obesity range. She might have a metabolic problem. And with some of the history that you described, Becca, of the weight cycling history up and down in this 30-pound range, we know that that's not healthy. It leads to increased visceral fat around the organs. It leads to cardiovascular risk. It leads to glucose and insulin abnormalities and imbalances. So there could very well be metabolic problems going on, even though the body weight's not high. So if it were my patient, I would get more tests done to find out what's going on before really adding more medication. I would look at a body composition test with a DEXA scan machine to see what's the lean mass amount. Do we have adequate lean mass, adequate bone density, because the weight cycling can affect that. What about the body fat? Is there fat in the organs, the visceral fat from the weight cycling history? Just get some more information there. And then also with the blood sugar levels and the insulin levels, find out what's going on there. Are there episodes of low blood sugar? Is there a low leptin level? Are the reproductive hormones normal? How really good is the nutrition intake? Because we really want to keep that mechanical eating and really well fueled consistently. And so one thing that you said, Becca, was that you wanted to lose weight in a sustainable way without going back to restrictive dieting. So that already sounds like you're not letting go of the calorie in, calorie out, because you're actually considering going back to restrictive dieting. So that concerns me. And so I always evaluate people a whole lot before adding medication, just like your doctor is kind of a little hesitant trying to figure out what is appropriate or not. I don't think that naltrexone would be harmful to add it. The bupropion, Wellbutrin, improves part of the metabolism path, but it on its own doesn't really do a whole lot metabolically without adding the naltrexone. So I'm not saying that that's the wrong thing to do. I'm just saying it's much better to get a full workup, find out what the metabolic problems are, really know what you're monitoring, and really commit to not restricting again and not going back to the weight cycling again ever, no matter what. Just because this is probably how you got where you are. So you kind of have to do that total change of mindset to that fueling. And I would actually maybe see a dietitian. That I always recommend the dietitians who have experience with eating disorders, just not because you have an eating disorder, but just because they're trained on that fueling paradigm, how to fuel your body versus any of the restriction stuff. So I would start there with a dietitian and more workup to find out what's going on, including the body composition testing that's going to be more accurate, and just committing more to getting off that weight cycling train.
Okay, Becca, thank you.
I have the next question, and it's from Linnea in Bothell, Washington. And it's about, is being overweight always metabolic dysfunction?
Ooh.
And she says, I'm curious if everyone who is overweight or obese has metabolic dysfunction. And if so, why does the U.S. have much higher rates of metabolic dysfunction compared to other countries with lower obesity rates? That's an interesting question.
Yeah.
That's a great question. I love this one because my answer is, does everyone who's overweight or obese have metabolic dysfunction? Yes. But yes, I really do think so. And I know that sounds crazy. Of course, they've done scientific experiments where they've fed rodents. You can feed an animal and force their weight up when they don't have a metabolic problem. You could do that to humans in research studies too, but it's very unlikely that these things, especially in the obesity category, would happen without a metabolic dysfunction being the root cause. It's natural for our weight to fluctuate a lot, though, and be totally normal without a metabolism problem. Not, we get a steady weight, but then it's typical in the winter, especially if you live in a colder climate, your weight's going to go up somewhat, and that's completely normal. And so, but yes, I think so. And why the U.S.? Well, you think about it, U.S. is probably the highest obesity rate of a large, economically developed country. And the U.S. is also one of the most, the countries that expose the most to endocrine disruptor influence in our water and our air supply. We just don't have the regulations that some of the other countries do have to protect us against a lot of the chemicals in the environment. So because we're so economically developed, we use a lot of industry. We're exposed to a lot of chemicals in our environment that can throw our metabolic system off. And I think there's got to be some kind of connection there. And we haven't really been committed to cleaning up the environment. We have more PFAS circulating in the air, the water, which is so bad for our health. And we have the forever chemicals here that we don't have a plan for how to get rid of them. Whereas a lot of other countries have implemented plans. A lot of the other developed countries have implemented plans. Not all countries, but some have. And so I think that has a lot to do with it. And then the way our healthcare system is, I think, has been also a culprit in just ignoring metabolic dysfunction, ignoring preventative disease, and intervening earlier. So a lot of times with that kind of attitude in our healthcare system, we're not curbing with each generation the amplification of metabolism problems that occur. And so if you're not treating mothers with gestational diabetes, then the offspring is going to be exposed to increased risk for diabetes, obesity, and the mom's going to be exposed to higher risk in her lifetime for diabetes. So we don't do a good job of screening for preventive diseases, attacking those. We don't do a good job of keeping our environment clean. So that's kind of my thought. We also have a lot of stress in our country, and stress plays a role. So I think the high stress levels are part of it. And our neighborhoods aren't designed for regular easy physical activity or socialization. And socialization plays a role too. So there's so many things you could look at, actually, from a sociology and environmental standpoint.
Wow, that's really interesting. All right, Linnea, thank you for that. All right, next up is Paula from North Carolina. What do you do when you're already 80 pounds overweight? So Paula says, so I've been listening for weeks now, and you're leaving me hanging. Fine, I get it. Diets don't work and disrupt your metabolism. But what is someone supposed to do when they are 80 pounds overweight? You have to get to a healthy weight before you can implement your just eat and sleep and move advice. That's an interesting question, Dr. Cooper. It's kind of a catch-22.
I love it, Paula. I hear you. Well, we don't have to wait. You don't have to wait to get to a healthy weight before you implement those strategies. In fact, if you don't implement those strategies, you probably won't get to a healthy weight. But implementing the strategies isn't enough to get to a healthy weight. And I agree with you on that. So I do think the mechanical eating, the getting enough sleep, the fueling any physical activity, we just talked about in another question, the socialization. It is showing more and more to be important for our metabolic health too. And so all of those things are important, for our health in general and our metabolic health, but they don't have the power to reverse obesity. But if you go on these diets and you keep repeating them, it actually hampers your metabolism more, and it leads to increase in your body weight eventually. So even if you have short-term weight loss, it's going to end up where you're just on a diet cycle up and down. So the answer, unfortunately, people don't want to hear this, and they get upset about it, but really we need pharmacology. We need the pharmacology because what they've identified is while obesity is a physical sign of a metabolic problem, that underlying metabolic problem is a disease state. It's called a multi-metabolic and hormonal disease state. And that means you need medication or surgery or combination of those to get at the underlying metabolic issues that are driving that in order to really change that body weight set point on the long term. So that's what I advise is implementing a pharmacologic strategy and seeing how that works, but in conjunction with, alongside the mechanical eating, the sleeping well, taking care of yourself. And those combined efforts are what is going to really be the big help.
Yeah, and it's counterintuitive, Dr. Cooper, isn't it? It's like we have been so indoctrinated into the idea that if you want to lose weight, you have to eat less and exercise more. And that just is so, when you're struggling with that extra 80 pounds, eating and, eating well is kind of goes against everything we've been told, right?
Yeah, I see what you mean. Hmm.
But your strategy is a sound one.
Yes.
You have to eat well and add science.
Yeah,
I love
That's
exactly.
it.
what I say.
Yeah, and don't feel guilty or ashamed to eat normally and fuel your body because that is going to help keep your metabolism feeling secure.
Yep. Well, the next question is a big one. It's like, when do ghrelin and leptin normalize? That's what Shauna Boyechko, who is a Canadian living in Mexico, it's like she skipped the middle. That's what Shauna wants to know. She says, I've been on Monjaro for about 4 months, and she says, I started listening to your podcast a couple of weeks ago. It's been very enlightening. I have been focused on weight loss and worrying about calories and carbs. Now I have a better understanding of how all the various hormones get out of whack with metabolic dysfunction, and I'm now focused on balanced and mechanical eating. My question is how long it typically takes before the metabolism responds to balanced eating and the hormones such as ghrelin and leptin start to function properly. Thank you all for the podcast. I wish I had this information 40 years ago. Yeah, you and me and Mark too. We all wish. It could have saved us a lot of anxiety.
Yep.
Oh, well, Shauna, thanks so much for the message. I'm so glad that you are listening to the podcast and that it's making this difference for you. And it does take a while. The leptin in our clinical data that we're looking at, it incrementally improves. And so it takes at least 3 weeks of a consistent kind of pattern to make a very small improvement. So each, it's not just the few weeks that you're doing things differently, it's the long term, because you can also lose the progress really fast. And so every few weeks, if you're steadily doing something, it will start perking up. If you have a suppressed leptin, it will start perking it up. If you have a high ghrelin, it will start calming it down. But it has to continue long-term consistently. And that's the hard part for even our patients, because things come up in life and they get sidetracked, or they get ill, an illness that they're dealing with, or they travel and they may kind of fall off track with their nutrition and their sleep patterns. So do your best to just keep a consistent lifestyle, eating regularly, getting enough sleep. And over time, little by little, these hormones do improve from doing that, especially if in the past you used to be restricting things and underfueling your exercise. But it does take a long time. When I say a long time, it can be years. So, but the benefit of, if you do have a strong metabolic problem and you're carrying extra weight, or you're dealing with metabolic dysfunction that's affecting your health, considering that pharmacology in there to support the system while you're making those changes can be really, really helpful and effective. So that would be my comment on this.
Okay. Shauna, thanks for a great email. Next up, how can you gain weight on 1,200 calories a day? This is from Julie Green, who listens on Spotify. Julie says, I just listened to the Iron Man episode. I absolutely believe Anna was calorie restricting and overtraining in an underfueled state and gaining weight. But my question is, what are the metabolic pathways that allow for gaining weight on a 1,200 calorie diet? It does not seem to be possible if the first law of thermodynamics is true. And the first law of thermodynamics, I looked it up because I don't have it committed to memory, is also known as the law of conservation of energy. It states that energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed from one form to another. Really interesting question, Dr. Cooper. And I think I had the same question when we hear about severely restricted diets where people are doing crazy exercise and still gaining weight. How is that possible?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, this is what shocked me too. Long, long ago, when I first started to notice this in our patients and was measuring all the metabolic rates and things like that, trying to figure out how this was happening. But it's amazing that our metabolism can really become very altered if we're underfueling our exercise and we're really restricting those calories at those levels. And especially in people who have underlying metabolic dysfunction to begin with. And so, because underlying metabolic dysfunction already challenges the normal metabolic system that lets us burn fuel and utilize energy versus conserve energy and hold back our ability to burn fuel. So, but the body, when it's in conservation mode, a lot of stuff happens. Our fat burning capacity slows way down, called lipolysis, slows way down the machinery that allows that to happen. And our body temperature, our core temperature lowers, our reproductive hormones become a little weaker. Our thyroid hormone output can reduce by like 30 something percent just from underfueling exercise. And all of these different reactions throughout our body just come to a slowdown that enables an enormous amount of energy conservation. So that's what people don't realize, is that our bodies are so dynamic and they are capable of making these changes and these shifts. And so the same thing happens, that if you happen to eat a little bit more, your body can increase your metabolic rate and burn more fuel. That's why people don't walk around with a notebook and how many calories they're eating all the time to try to maintain their weight. People that don't have metabolic dysfunction don't pay any attention to that. They have days where they eat a lot more. They have days where they eat a lot less. Their weight is always the same. So it's because our metabolism is very, very adaptive to our energy intake, our energy output, and the perception that it has of our weight status and our food supply. So between all of the misperceptions that occur with metabolic dysfunction and the real restrictions that people put themselves through, it can really, really slow down. And it is mind-boggling how much it can. And so that's why I'm so adamant with our own patients that they don't get themselves into a situation where they're opening the door for this metabolic adaptation to occur and to take hold. Because once they do that, it's very hard. There's a lot of what's called weight loss resistance for people who have high weight. Once that happens, it's just like the brakes go on. And that's what we don't want to happen. So I hope that clarifies it a bit.
Yeah, great answer.
This next one is about sleeve gastrectomy. Sleeve gastrectomy. I had this, so I should know how to say it. Sleeve gastrectomy and still hard to eat enough. It's from Lori in Pennsylvania. And this is her email. I had VSG surgery 6 years ago and lost over 100 pounds. I regained about 30 over the last 2 years. Now I'm on a GLP-1 and I've successfully lost back down to my lowest weight. My problem is eating enough healthy food and calories. My stomach is artificially small. I try my best to fuel concentrating on protein, healthy, well-rounded diet, not eliminating any particular food groups, not doing the very low carb anymore. So I guess what she wants to know is, how does she eat enough?
Yeah, that's a great question.
But it
too.
is a really good question, because
It is.
I kind of know what she's going through,
Yeah.
because when you have the tiny, as I call it, tiny tummy, you have to really make sure that you're doing mechanical eating, which we do, and that you get all your categories in every snack. I call myself the queen of snacks.
Yeah. That is one trick. It's making sure you really amp up the frequency of eating, Because it's true, at any one given meal time, you're not going to be able to consume as much volume because of the size of the stomach change. And you may need to also incorporate more what we call concentrated calories, things that don't always have huge amounts of fiber, because that fiber can fill up your stomach and then you don't have room for the nutrients that you might need. So I think nutrient dense foods are really helpful. Eating super frequently is very helpful. And revisiting the dose of the GLP-1 and seeing if it might be too strong and trying to reduce that a little. Because sometimes, and it's great that the results from the surgery sounded really good because to lose that much weight with the surgery and then even having it creep up a little bit, that's still considered good outcome from surgery. And then adding the GLP-1 seemed to be effective. So the question is, is there wiggle room to lower the GLP-1 a little to improve the appetite and to increase the frequency of eating, maybe switch up some of the foods so you're getting more what we call nutrient dense foods. And working with a dietitian is good, one that's not focused on diets and low carbs and restriction, but one that's focused on fueling. And I think that could be a good strategy.
I would say to work with the dietitian and get like a really good snack list
Yes.
so that you're doing things that you love. That's also really important to make sure that the dietitian like gets a list of all the things that you love so that you can have them throughout the day in little doses and that you carry them with you is really, really important. And like there's little sneaky things. Don't drink when you eat is also really important because that fills you up. Like it's just a weird thing. Like for so many years, like you drank when you were eating. Don't do that anymore. And like little sneaky things like I know Jennifer taught me to like put the protein drink in my coffee, and that was like a little sneaky thing to give me extra nutrients, during times. And just like like putting high, like what you said, high protein things and high nutrient things that you might not have done before.
All right. Next up, is the set point theory real? This is from an anonymous listener in Massachusetts. Short and to the point, what's the deal with set point theory? And is it just a lie made up by thin people? This is great.
I love it. Well, yeah, the set point is very interesting. And I think there's so much arguments about this set point. But to me,
What is it anyway, Dr. Cooper?
well,
I don't even know what it is.
what it kind of refers to is that everyone has a natural weight their body holds them at. And it used to be thought if you have a high weight, well, that's just your set point. So that's where your body wants to hold you at. And so no matter what you do, it's going to just try to go back there. And to that, there's some truth to this. But when we think about, well, what determines that set point? And I'm a big fan of looking at the metabolic pathway. The peripheral system sends the signals to the brain. How nourished are we? How much do we weigh? The brain interprets all those signals and kind of processes that information through several different substations within what's called the melanocortin pathway. And eventually it hits these receptors called the melanocortin receptors. That melanocortin receptor activation is really what determines our weight set point, where our natural weight will be. And so if you have glitches in your pathway and you can't get the signal to the melanocortin receptors, well, then you will end up where that set point's not functioning clearly. It's not really seeing all your weight, so it's setting it at a higher level. It's not getting enough signals to prove that you weigh enough, so it's trying to set it always at a higher level. If you have a strong metabolic system, you're getting signals there that aren't getting a lot of interference, and that enables the weight set point to balance in a more, quote, normal range. So that's where when you start introducing some of the pharmacology or the surgery to treat metabolic dysfunction, those kind of strategies improve the signaling going from the periphery to the brain and sometimes even improve aspects of that brain pathway with certain pharmacology. And that can enable a stronger signal hitting those melanocortin receptors, which then the brain says, whoa, wait a minute. I thought the weight was low, but it's actually high. And that kind of gives the authorization to the body to burn fuel, utilize this extra fuel, kind of unblinds it to stored depots of energy, like in the adipose tissue, the body fat, so that it liberates that as energy that we can use and burn and not have to carry around. So even though there is this like set point idea, it's not that it can't change. It can change. It's almost like people with obesity, their set point is obstructed. Their set point function is obstructed and it's artificially elevated, where their natural set point is lower. And you can see that when you treat a lot of patients with this condition and they end up at these like normal weights or even on the lower end of a normal weight, but that's their natural. And they're shocked because they never realized that before. But it's because once you remove all those obstructions, that set point functions better, set point operation there, that melanocortin receptors functions better and gets better signals and sends better signals back to the body to the point where there's not the need to carry around a lot of energy stores that you're just carrying around and not able to use. So it's like you're carrying a big, pounds and pounds of adipose tissue with all this locked in energy that you're not allowed to tap into to use for energy until you get these good signals circulating from this metabolic pathway. So I hope that's not too technical, but that's technically what is going on.
That makes sense.
Here's one on genetics and lifelong Zepbound. This is from Jean, and she's from Massachusetts. An interesting study on genetics. I take Zepbound, and it was effective immediately. And in old sepia photos, my ancestors are all obese. I'm looking forward to learning more about this. Does it mean that I'm going to have to take Zepbound for the rest of my life?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, my.
Hi, Jean. Well, it's great you have those old photos and you looked at them and you noticed, there's a lot of large people there. Because as we always say, the main factor in whether someone is affected by this high body weight situation is really genetics. And so I think because you see that a lot of people were affected, most likely you have a pretty strong genetic component to your condition. And most likely, yes, you will probably need to be on a medication like that. I mean, there'll be new ones coming out. There'll be some changes over time, but some type of pharmacologic support for your metabolism, most likely. That's without knowing much about you or anything about your labs, but usually that would be the case for someone like you. And if you have a very high body weight, or if you had childhood onset of high body weight, you might consider getting tested through what we always mention, this rare genetic obesity program where they test for single gene mutations that can run in families. So it might be interesting to get screened there. It's a free test. So we'll put the link to that on our show notes too. But yep, I think the answer is most likely you'll need to stay on something long term.
Okay, Jean, thank you for that. Next up, trauma and metabolism. This is from Kirsten Brown from Melbourne, Australia. Hi, team. Thank you so much for Fat Science here in Oz. Metabolic medicine is in its infancy and obesity medicine is highly stigmatized, so the information you provide has been a godsend. My question, what are your thoughts about the links between trauma, especially childhood trauma, and metabolism/weight? Interesting question, Dr. Cooper.
Mm-hmm. Well, trauma in childhood is just so extreme and it affects our health usually long term, like forever, basically, in a lot of different ways. So, and the interesting thing is you can kind of see some markers sometimes in the blood work of adults that had early childhood traumas. For example, related to growth hormone and a hormone that's related to growth hormone called IGF-1 production is sometimes affected by that. But for sure, trauma can affect metabolism, especially in children, because it disrupts normal growth and development. And so it can affect children's sleep patterns. It can cause definitely increased stress. And we know both of those can affect ghrelin levels, leptin levels, insulin levels, and can really alter the metabolic function. So I think if you have somebody who has genetics related to obesity or diabetes, then they're exposed to childhood trauma. That's going to amplify the potential metabolic glitches there and kind of amp up any kind of tendency toward diabetes, obesity, insulin resistance, and even cardiometabolic dysfunction. So there's a lot of connection there.
Here's a good one. This is about medication and weight gain with GLP-1s. This is from Lynn, and she listens on Apple. So she says, I know a few people who were stuck with weight gain after being put on certain medications that are known to add pounds. While they could diet and lose weight before, they were stuck for years dealing with added weight. The GLP-1 medications got the scale moving, and I'm wondering if you have any experience with this. I actually do have experience with this because I was put on steroids for a problem that I had, which put me behind like by about a year, and I gained a little weight, and it sort of put my whole trajectory into my whole process. It put me back by about, what was it, like by about a year and a half.
Yeah.
I mean, I got better because of the medical thing that the steroids helped with, but it sort of pushed everything back by about a year and a half.
Sure.
So it was a plus and a minus all at the same time.
Well, and that's the way it is with these meds. This is a great question, Lynn, and I have a lot of experience dealing with this. And in fact, it's something that's like the number one thing that you do when you have patients is look at their medication list and see how many metabolically unfriendly medications are on the list. Unfortunately, we have metabolically unfriendly medicines in a lot of categories. Mood medications, most of them are metabolically unfriendly, meaning they can hamper our metabolic hormone function or drive up our insulin levels. And even some blood pressure medicines, certain cholesterol medicines, definitely steroids, as Andrea brought up, have an impact on the metabolism. So there are a lot of medications that can trigger abnormal weight gain. And so the good news is, as you pointed out, Lynn, the GLP medications can help counteract that. So it's been shown for more than a decade that adding GLP medication or metformin, in the case of especially mood medicines that are triggering weight gain, can be very, very helpful to counteract those negative side effects of the mood meds. So it's very important to have a good mood because a lot of these meds are prescribed for important things. Like Andrea said, the steroids for important condition that she had to take them. And same thing with these mood medications like antipsychotic medications and some of the SSRI type medications for depression. People need to be on those meds if it's keeping their mood better and more stable, but then we have to think about what can we do to counteract those negative side effects. Another area that is linked to potential weight gain would be even for women, birth control pills and progesterone medication, especially in certain forms, can trigger weight gain too. So these happen because of, as I said, either alterations in insulin levels causing insulin elevation, insulin resistance, or alterations in ghrelin and leptin and some of the hunger signals in the brain. All of this is a potential concern. And in many cases, it's not even known exactly how they're causing the weight gain. So we don't know what their total effect on the metabolism is. But the good news is adding something to counterbalance it makes a lot of sense for people that are challenged by that.
Okay, our final one is from Anonymous. Why did Ozempic work but Mounjaro didn't? Hi, my question is, I know someone who did Ozempic and it was amazing for her. She switched to Mounjaro because she thought it would be even better, but she gained weight on it. Why does that happen? Dr. Cooper, interesting, because they're both GLP-1s, right?
Well, they're different. The Ozempic's a pure GLP-1.
Hmm.
The Mounjaro is a dual agonist. So it's the first breakthrough medicine that's combining two of these, what are called incretins, the gut hormones. So it's GLP-1 and GIP, and
Ah,
it's right, and it's like 5 times as much GIP as GLP-1. So it does not have as much of a GLP-1 impact as the Ozempic does, but it has this GIP. And they're both hormones that affect our metabolism similarly, but definitely this is a good example. I love this question because it's an example of how everyone's different. And even though these meds are marketed as though this medicine's better than that medicine and these older medicines are too weak, that's just not true because every patient is different and everyone responds differently to the medications. And so I'm not surprised to hear this because I have a good number of patients that are in that same category. And one of the ideas that could be happening, we don't know or not if it's true or not, because it hasn't been studied or reported on, but in our brain receptors, we have receptors for both GLP-1 and GIP. And it's possible that people may have a resistance to the GIP signal. So then when they take the dual agonist, which is the Mounjaro, or also called Zepbound, it's possible that by overloading their GIP receptors with more of a GIP signal is making their receptor even more resistant to the signal. So if that were to happen, then it doesn't really have much effectiveness if that's happening. But we have no way to know. We have no way to know because it's not been reported. I'm sure it will be soon. There'll be some studies coming out looking at that closer. And but I just think that just gives you some really good information that GIP isn't really the medicine that's going to work for you and or for your friend. And so stick with the GLP-1 group of meds, the pure GLP-1s, and try to go that angle.
that's really interesting, Dr. Cooper. And I think in the last couple of episodes here, you've kind of said this a couple of times where more isn't always necessarily better because some people are like, what more should I add to the cocktail? And your response is, if what's working is working, maybe don't add anything more.
Exactly. I'm
Right.
afraid to change something. I always say, don't rock the boat. I mean, if something's working, don't start monkeying around because what you do could derail all the progress. And even if it seems like a logical step, I really don't. I wait until we're sure nothing's working and I see that as, okay, this is an opportunity to make a change up. Even if you kind of notice that there's some kind of weakness brewing in there, but everything seems to be doing okay, I just hands off. That's kind of my strategy.
Yeah, and also people have asked about dosing too. Some people want to race to the highest dose, and
Yeah.
you always say, well, why would you do that if a lower dose would work?
It's so true because you
Yeah.
just never know what's on the other side of these changes you're making. And if you go up to a higher dose and then you lose your appetite, now you've got the metabolic adaptation kicking in because your brain thinks you're starving again. Then that's fighting your progress. It could be that you're just triggering problems.
All right, this has been a fun episode, another mailbag episode. I'd love to ask any takeaways, Andrea. What's on your mind?
I just love that everybody has so many different kinds of questions and that they come from all over. It's always interesting to me. And I love that, like, in Australia, like, the whole idea is sort of at the beginnings of everything. Like, I think that's interesting. And I don't know, it's just really, it's so fun.
Yeah, it really is. I think my takeaway, Dr. Cooper, is that whenever I talk with friends about this kind of stuff, it's so funny how some people will say, "Well, you know what Bob did is
Yes.
and then it's okay
Oh,
that worked for Bob." And
right. It
what
didn't work for him.
I'm constantly reminded that those of us without medical training and experience in treating metabolic dysfunction, we don't know what works.
Yeah.
So stop saying, cut out carbs, you'll
Yeah.
lose weight.
Right. I always want to say, where did you get your medical degree? I'm sorry.
Yeah, yeah. But I think
That's
also
the
too,
inside voice.
just in humility, we are reminded that everyone's metabolism is absolutely completely unique. And what works for one person might not work for the next person. So
this is-
I'm constantly reminded of that. So, Dr.
Right.
Cooper, what's your
Yeah.
takeaway?
Well, I
from
was
the
just going to
episode?
say this is always an area where everyone thinks they're an expert.
Oh, yeah.
Your relatives, your coworkers, your friends, and so don't fall for it. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
But yeah, and I think I just love getting all these questions. I wish we could get through them all. We have like hundreds of questions.
Yeah, literally hundreds.
We do, and it's wonderful hearing from everyone from around the world too, because we do get that insight, as Andrea said, into different countries and where they are with like the acceptance, the weight acceptance, and some of the acceptance of this obesity as a disease model. And then I just wanted to remind people that we do have on our website a scientific references link. So fatsciencepodcast.com. And at the bottom, there's like a link to the scientific references. And I'll try to update those every few months. So with additional references, but just in case anybody wants to look at any of those.
Yeah, that's a great resource. If you've heard Dr. Cooper make reference to a scientific journal or study, you can find it there, fatsciencepodcast.com, and then scroll to the bottom and hit scientific references. Well, this has been enlightening. As always, thanks you two for another edition of Fat Science.
No diets, no agendas, just science that makes you feel better.